you are not doing it wrong. If the sleep association is working for your baby and it's working for you, carry on. And if it's not, then it's time to look at what's going to work better that steers you in the same direction that you're wanting to go. Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. Before we jump into this episode, I wanted to share some exciting news for you if you are an allied health professional working with families with infants or very young children, and you have wanted to understand baby sleep better so you can support your clients or patients better. I am offering the Foundations of Infant Sleep for Allied Health Professionals in November. This is a 2-part workshop available virtually, live, but also recorded, because I know what it's like balancing your profession with taking courses. In this workshop, we'll be covering the basics of infant and child sleep, looking at the biology of sleep, what the research says about what sleep development looks like, and how to use environmental and attachment-based strategies to make sleep easier for families. You can find out more about it and enroll at familysleep.ca/professional-workshop. I look forward to seeing you in November. Welcome back to the Baby Sleep Connection podcast. We are talking today about something that comes up all the time in my private practice, and that is sleep associations. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. Actually, most of it is good. My goal by the end of this podcast is that you will be feeling like the way you look at sleep associations is much more positive than perhaps you're feeling right now, because the reality is that when we hear the phrase sleep associations, many of us hear bad habits. And so my goal is that by the end, you will not feel like sleep associations are bad habits. We're going to delve into what they are, how to develop sleep associations that actually work for your baby and you, if the ones that are linked to sleep right now are not working well, and a few reframes of what you might be saying to yourself, your self-talk around sleep associations or links with sleep, so that you can release some of the, I'll call it clunky approach to sleep associations that carries a heavy weight for you. So let's dive in. So one of the biggest questions parents ask me is about sleep associations. They want to know when it's a problem, and if so, how to change it. Often parents are uncomfortably and with a degree of feeling guilty or shame that there's a particular association that their baby has. And it often goes something like, I'm feeding my baby to sleep at every wake, or they need the soother to fall asleep, or I'm rocking them to sleep and it's getting difficult and I don't want to do that anymore. But my baby doesn't seem to be able to fall asleep any other way. So if you've ever worried about whether any of these things are inherently a bad habit, first, you're not alone. Second, they are not bad habits if they are working, and they are something worth attending to and changing when they are no longer working. So this episode is about really getting clear on the benefits of sleep association, giving you some gentle guidance around how to use them in a way that feels good, or acknowledge that they can feel good. This is not about judgment. This is about making things work for you and your baby. So what are sleep associations? Well, let's lay out a clear working definition. This may not encompass everything, but let's start with the idea that sleep associations are conditions or cues that babies connect with falling asleep. They could be feeding, rocking, pacifier. I've mentioned all those 3. It could be that darkness is a cue or association for sleep, white noise, cuddles, a lullaby, even the nighttime routine or bedtime routine. If it's really consistent, it may really, for your baby, become an association with sleep, that one thing follows to another. They are not value-based. There's no judgment on any of these things, right? They aren't bad. We're not judging them. We're looking at, does this work? Is it continuing to work, and is it sustainable for you? And I'm going to bring in a few adult parallels to really, if you're really stuck on this idea of trying to reconceptualize sleep associations as not being steeped in judgment or having a particular good or bad value. When I hear the coffee grinder going, that for me is a morning association for soon, when that coffee has been brewed, for me to take a pause and sit quietly with my journal or with a book and do something that for me is a wonderful way to start the day. When I hear the birds in the morning, it's a cue to wake up, unless it's that early morning, like 4:30 a.m. part. We'll see that that's hopefully not too strong an association. When your alarm, if you use an alarm to wake up in the morning, it is associated. Your body gets used to hearing that alarm and knowing it's time to get up or knowing it's time to press snooze again. I was, in preparing for this podcast, I was thinking about what are some of the associations that had really positive memories for me growing up. And one of them was the sound of the gravel on our driveway when my dad got home from work. I could tell when it was his car in the driveway and not anybody else's. It wasn't someone delivering something or a friend visiting. It was my dad pulling into the driveway, and it was associated with anticipating getting to say hi to him and getting to catch up for the day. Perhaps dinner was happening at some point soon. When my kids were younger, we had a cleanup song, and so it was associated with certain things that we did. When we heard that song, it was time to clean up. So many of these associations are things that I'd like to point out that are not necessarily deliberate. I think most of the examples I've just given for adults or for when I was a child, they weren't deliberately put in place to make an association with what was going to happen. It was repeatedly over time. When one thing happened and it led to another, they became linked. And so when we apply this, let's apply it to adult sleep. When you think about how you like to fall asleep, it could be that you do a certain little puff up of your pillow to get it comfy before you lie down. Or it could be that you listen to a meditation or a hypnosis track or a podcast as part of your falling asleep. And if you've done that repeatedly and it leads to sleep, it becomes a sleep association. So I want to emphasize that sleep associations are not inherently bad. They are a way of wiring in routine and rhythm, and we all have them. So let's talk about what is helpful with sleep associations and what can be challenging. And I will do my best to avoid specific examples. I'm going to end up mentioning examples, but this is really going to be specific to you and your baby. When you look at how you're laying out the bedtime routine, what happens leading up to bedtime, and what are the things that you are comfortable with and open to repeatedly having as part of bedtime routine or nap time routine, so that you do have positive sleep associations that are working for your baby. So helpful associations are ones that are predictable because they happen over and over. They're sustainable, so you can do them over and over. So easy to repeat. For example, if you are always at bedtime drawing the blinds and getting out the sleep sack and putting on a lullaby music track or starting to sing a lullaby, and you get used to those three things, you find it comforting and enjoyable because you know that this leads to sleep, then great. These are all working. The other associations that I've mentioned before, like rocking or feeding, can also be valuable sleep associations that lead your baby to know when this happens, then sleep is inevitable. It's coming. We often frame those more intense parent active ones, like feeding or rocking to sleep. They often get mistakenly viewed as bad habits or bad sleep associations. Often that's because at some point, a few things happen with those high intensity ones that are different than pulling out the sleep sack and getting the blind down. Often they work really well until they don't. And there's usually two reasons they don't work any longer. One is your baby has moved on, and that link between, for example, feeding and sleep starts to be less closely tied. Like you start discovering that feeding does not always lead to sleep. And if you don't have other sleep associations or supports for your baby, then there's this gap for a while where feeding isn't working. Now your baby's still awake and you've got nothing in your back pocket to use. But the other part is when they stop feeling good for parents. So when you are feeling like just really want to move on from feeding to sleep at every wake, or rocking is getting difficult because your baby is getting bigger. Holding them until they are asleep is difficult because transferring them becomes either impossible if you are transferring to the crib and you're the same stature as I am and you literally can't do it with any grace whatsoever, and you can't get your baby into the crib without waking up, or your baby is just highly sensitive to that transfer and they used to do it when they were very young and now they're not. So ultimately, the challenging sleep associations are the ones that either don't work or you feel compelled to change. So the key message here is it's only a problem if it feels like one. If it's working for your family and you're feeling well rested enough, then there's no need to change it. At least right now. Maybe down the road, you'll decide that this isn't working for you anymore. But for now, you don't need to go looking for a problem. You don't need to decide that this sleep association is something that you have to judge as poor or bad. So what I want you to think about and reflect on this week is, what are the cues or associations for your baby's sleep that feel supportive? That means they work for your baby and they work for you. And which ones are starting to feel, or have felt for a while, exhausting? In other words, which ones would you like to have as part of your baby's or your routine? Which ones would you like to keep? I'll add that you may have a chance to reflect on which ones you would like to add in. Sometimes when I was trying to rejig what I thought was a real crummy bedtime routine for my kids, I was just like, this is not something I'm looking forward to. It's not pleasant. I want the day to end on a high note, and these things are just not doing it for me. So what can I do? To brainstorm a little bit around, what do I want bedtime to look like? What things do I want to happen each night that are simple and enjoyable and calming, that then over time become a sleep association for my babies? And now that I have teenagers in the house, I'm reflecting just in real time right now. I didn't give any thought to this, but they have their own sleep associations now. These routines and habits that move them toward bedtime, that become a bit of a ritual or routine. I don't like all of them, but my 15-year-old has something that he spends time on a tablet in the evening as part of his bedtime routine. I would love to not have a tablet be a part of the bedtime routine. However, at this point in time, it is working well enough for him, and it's kind of like this doorway to bedtime. Like, this happens, and then he goes through his bedtime routine upstairs. He has it all worked out. At this stage in my parenting, there are some things that I wouldn't have in the routine if I were still parenting very young children, but our kids are also navigating this throughout their growth and development. When I don't like my own bedtime, or I find that we're going to bed too late, I know that it's time to look at, how am I going to lay out this routine? Those repeated, enjoyable pieces that are easy to do and not push off. And it could be reading to your baby or child. It could be a lullaby. I always loved using lullabies when my kids were younger. And so look for the ones that you want to keep, ditch the ones that don't work anymore, fill in the gap with something that is enjoyable and sustainable. So how do we build some sleep associations that are going to work better perhaps than the ones that you have in place right now? The first is to introduce the consistent cues, something that you enjoy, that's easy to do, and that can be consistent. Because sleep associations don't start out as associations, they start out as a new routine or a new piece to the routine. The other thing is to layer the new cues alongside the ones that are already present. We don't need to do a bait and switch. We don't need to remove everything that you're already doing and put in new ones. This isn't about out with the old and in with the new. It's about layering on and then letting the ones that are no longer working as well fade by the side, like just kind of fade out. And that means making changes gradually too. So if rocking, for example, because I've had a lot of families that are struggling with rocking their growing babies. Their babies are big. Parents' arms feel like they're going to fall off. And so gradually fading away from that sleep association while you layer some other ones on. For example, shortening the rocking time by just a little bit, just shaving off a little bit of that time gradually over a period of days. I always talk about, it's not just the time that you're doing something, it's the intensity. So if you're rocking or bouncing, you just kind of turn down the amplitude or the magnitude of the rocking or bouncing. just a little bit so that you're not doing it as intensely, but you haven't just taken the whole thing out completely. As you're winding down a sleep association that isn't working, you're replacing it with another one. You're replacing it with something that's more sustainable. Sometimes, other times, actually, there may not even be a need to add one. If a baby is already in your arms and you're winding down how long you're rocking them or how intensely you're rocking them, you may find that you're just slowly fading it out and your arms are still around them. Your smell is still there for them. If they were to open their eyes or still have their eyes open, they're seeing you. So you may not need to add something in specifically. And then take the time and consistency to let this work in. Knowing that if something starts to not feel like a good fit, you can change course. So the key piece here that I want to emphasize is a good, and I know I said no judgment, a good for you, something that's working for you, a good sleep association doesn't have to be a perfect sleep association. It means something that's workable for you, your baby, and your whole family's dynamic. So let's jump into some reframing here, because I know that a lot of you are going to have this self-talk dialogue going in that you're repeating to yourself that makes it really hard to open up this idea that sleep associations are not bad. So the first that I often hear is, am I creating a bad habit? First, let's talk about habits. Habits are how we learn, and habits are how we reduce how much thinking we have to do. I'm going to bring up a completely unrelated example again, and that is what I used to do around meal times with kids. This example happened to pop up on social media for me, and I remember doing this with meal times and having a specific type of meal. Every day of the week had its own specific meal. Taco Tuesdays was like something Mexican, refried beans and chicken and burritos, any of that kind of stuff. We had pasta one day, we had fish another day, we had a vegetarian dish another day. And just getting into the habit of each day its own meal meant that I was thinking 50% less on what we were going to serve. And that was a great habit to get into. When it comes to sleep, when we get into habits, it means that we get to be a little bit more on autopilot, and so do our babies. We know what's happening next. What fires together wires together. So when sleep association A happens, we know that B, sleep, is coming. The other concern I often hear is, will my baby always need this to fall asleep? The short answer is no. Your baby's needs are going to shift with their development. What feels necessary or is necessary for your baby right now may naturally fade out on its own, stop working as well because it's just not as tight a fit based on development. Often that's related to feeding or even rocking. Parents will say, this worked before and it doesn't anymore. And it's like, great, you used it while it was available to you. It was a great sleep association and now it's time to move on. And so no, your baby will not always need you to fall asleep. And at the same time, you can nudge shape what those sleep associations are so that you're not turned inside out and backwards trying to give specifically what your baby needs to get to sleep. We're looking for the wiggle room, right? We're looking for a little wedge, a soft, gentle wedge between what they're expecting to have happen and sleep so that you can introduce something else that is a little bit more sustainable. And I'll finish this one line of thought with the idea that you are not doing it wrong. If the sleep association is working for your baby and it's working for you, carry on. And if it's not, then it's time to look at what's going to work better that steers you in the same direction that you're wanting to go. You wouldn't want to replace a highly intense sleep association that is exhausting you with an equally high intense sleep association that requires a lot of your energy. You want to move in the direction towards being able to expend a little less energy, think a little less about it, and be able to carry on through the unfolding of their sleep development with you supporting them in the ways that makes the most sense and works. So what are my key takeaways? I want to kind of sum up the points that I've made so far. 1, sleep associations are natural and universal. We all have them. And in fact, to me, the more associations that we can have both in the sleep routines and the way that our day unfolds, the easier it is. We're not having to think about the things that we can put on as a habit or a routine. Second, I want to encourage you to focus on the cues or associations that are sustainable and supportive for you and your baby. This will be different than anybody else. You might see something that works really well for another family and you think, gosh, that sounds lovely. I want that to work, but it may not be a good fit for you. So stay open to what's going to be sustainable and workable for your family. And third, make small, gradual changes. They are often way more effective than a big shift, a sudden shift, because you're not having to work as hard to make it happen. It can be gradual and you can course correct if something isn't a good fit. The number of little adjustments we made to bedtime routine with our boys when they were younger, it was often. And whenever things got really clunky and unpleasant, if I was not looking forward to bedtime, I knew, well, either we were going through a really hard period of time with sleep where it was changing dramatically, or it was time to reboot the bedtime routine to make it, I'm going to say fun again. Maybe fun is not the right word if it's conjuring up like a party with lots of music, but I wanted to look forward to and enjoy bedtime, and I wanted my kids to as well. So when it started to feel clunky and like not something I was looking forward to, I knew it was time for a reboot. So I want you to trust yourself when it comes to finding and paying attention to the sleep associations that you're currently using and what you could use. You know your baby best. You can make adjustments on the way that fit best with what both of you need. In closing, I want to ask you to do a little bit of homework, reflective homework. I want you to really take notice of what helps your baby fall asleep. Ask yourself, which of the things that helps them fall asleep do you want to keep long term? Which ones do you want to change? And which ones can you change? Maybe there are some sleep associations you can't change, at least at this point in time. And once you've done that, if there are some sleep associations that you've decided to discard or ones that you really want to make more prominent, create your bedtime routine around the ones that work and let go of the ones that your baby has outgrown. And if anything from today's podcast resonates, I would love you to drop me a line and let me know that you've heard the episode and what jumped out for you. If you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss the next episode. I'd also encourage you to go to familysleep.ca/podcast. There is a listener guide that you can download that has my top episodes, my favorite books, a few of my top resources, and the opportunity to get on my email list so that you will also not miss the next episode. It's been a pleasure to have you listening in. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode soon. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.